As Renee mentioned, we've had the privilege of spending a lot of time really getting to know and research and talk with some of the best CEOs in the world. And while it's helpful for those in that role, most of the lessons learned actually apply to all of us as leaders. And so as we dive in, I'll try and share some stories to make it really applicable. The world needs great leaders right now, right? More than ever, whether it's in business roles, public sector roles, all around the world. The impact of these leaders and the decisions they're making and the stakeholders that are impacted just is ever increasing. And that was a big part of why we wanted to embark on this research and work. And I think the big question then we were trying to answer and really spent most of our time on is, well, how do you do it well? What's the secret to success? And it turns out, you can imagine across these 70 CEOs, very different personalities, very different contexts. They might show up differently and behave differently each day, but there was a set of underlying mindsets or ways of thinking about the role, ways of thinking about what they thought it meant to be a CEO and how they could be most helpful that was remarkably consistent across the interviews that we did. And that's the 6 mindsets that we can spend some time on. I'll show you the next page, which is quite dense, but this is sort of the answer all on one page. We'll then click in behind and bring each of them to life. But on this one page, you'll see against each of the roles in blue, what was that mindset? What was that mindset, that way of thinking that really enabled these leaders to outperform and to do so well? I'm actually we won't spend as much time on this page. It's good to know it's here as kind of a one-pager, but let's click into each of them and we'll tell some stories in behind. The first one around setting direction, right? And as I said, these are all things, setting the vision, right? Does the organization know what winning looks like? The strategy, what are your big moves to get there? Resource allocation, are you putting money and talent behind the things that you said were important? The mindset that was so clear in all of these excellent CEOs was this mindset of being bold. There was a boldness in their thinking as it came to setting direction that really set them apart. And now, to be fair, it probably should say be bold and be right. Right? Because if you were bold and wrong, you wouldn't have made the data set. You probably wouldn't be there 6 years on and you wouldn't have outperformed. But also, if you weren't bold, if you were incremental in your thinking, it also didn't put you into this group of folks who had really, outstepped their competitors as you think about company success. And so there was a confidence and a boldness and a willing to place big bets that really came through in these conversations. I'll share 2 examples, one on vision and one on resource allocation. The idea of vision and kind of reframing the game, right? What is the game we're playing as a company, as the CEO, kind of a unique vantage point to give permission to the organization for how should we think about ourselves? What is it that we're trying to do in the world? And Ajay Banga, when he took over as the CEO of MasterCard, and he took their market cap from about 10 billion to 300 billion in the decade he was there. So a huge growth story. And if you can rewind back when he started a little over a decade ago, the hallway chatter at MasterCard was all about, how do we beat Visa? How do we beat American Express? How do we beat Discover Card? How do we gain market share? That's the game that people thought they were playing. They were trying to win in credit card. And at the time, again, over a decade ago, it turns out that in the world's transactions, credit cards still accounted for less than 10% of how the world transacted. And so Ajay and his team, to be fair, it wasn't just him, but him and his team kind of stepped back and said, wait a minute, why are we kind of fighting over market share here in the corner, where really the game we could be playing, who we could be in the world, is to transform how the world transacts, right? We're a trusted partner. We can help all of those transactions get facilitated. And they came out with the phrase, which sounds a little aggressive, but was to kill cash. That was their thing, because at the time, 90% of the world was still operating in cash. And he said, what would it look like if we saw that as the playing field? And again, he didn't then go and micromanage and tell everyone all the ways they were going to go do that. But in setting that bar of what would happen if we were trying to play that game? It gave permission to the organization to go into debit card, to go into online payments, to go into all these other things that really was a huge part of their growth story. And so setting that bar, Reed Hastings again at Netflix, early days, he didn't start by saying, we're going to create the world's best mail order CD-ROM movie mailing company. Right, which is how they started. They started with this vision for, we want to transform entertainment and how people, entertain themselves, which allowed them to disrupt themselves and move into online streaming and all of those things that, if they had thought too small, would feel like it was competition, but instead that became part of their vision. So giving permission, setting the goal for the organization, the big vision is a big piece of this. And the last one, resource allocation, just a quick story there. Mary Barra at General Motors, she really put her money where her mouth is, right? It turns out most companies, their budgets across business units and functions flex about 3 to 4% a year, little tweaks on the margin, right? But for the most part, you get to, reallocate the money you've got. Mary Barra switched 50% of their R&D budget to electric vehicles. I mean, it's a massive bet, a massive swing. And to do that, she had to say no to some things, which is actually incredibly difficult to do as a leader. Her first budget cycle, they came to her with the business plan or the investment required to continue operating in India. They'd been in India for years and they had never made money. And she called time out and she's like, wait a minute, if there's no line of sight, should we actually be there? And she made the difficult choice to withdraw from that market. And she took some real flack for it, right? But it was all in service of, we know where we need to head. We're going to put our money where our mouth is and really make those big bets. So I know I spent a fair bit of time on this one, but this notion of whatever leadership role you're in, are you setting a bold direction and vision for who you're trying to be in the world that allows for the innovation and the growth and flex that you need? And are you really putting your money where your mouth is, even more than as the CFO? You as the senior leader can really make sure that you're taking it seriously if you say something's a priority.